Hi everyone. Normally when I teach this class, I have a little bit more time to tell you more about taxes, but because of our compressed schedule, we don't have as much time, we can't go into as much detail. So in this video, I just wanted to give you an overview of some of the important things we need to know for this course about taxes in Canada. We've already talked about a few things over the last couple days. Let's do a quick recap and then take it a couple steps further. So first of all, we've talked about what is tax. Tax is a certain percent of our income or a certain percent on products that we buy that we give to the government. And why do we have to pay tax? Tax is a way that we act as citizens of a country and help support the needs of our communities. So by giving tax, we give money that is used for things like education, things like healthcare, and infrastructure, things like roads and sewer systems and power lines and all those things that we need to actually, give us the benefits and services we need to live our daily lives. The money that we send to the CRA kind of comes from a few main deductions that we have taken off our paychecks, and these are often called payroll deductions. And there are three main payroll deductions that we want to remember and learn about in this course. The first is income tax. We've talked previously about how the amount of income tax you owe depends on how much money you make over the entire year, and that the more you make, the more you get taxed. So theoretically, the rich are able to contribute more because they have more money and are able to support people who don't earn as much money and may need more support. The other one is CPP, that's the Canada Pension Plan, and that is money that we give to the elderly and the older people in our society who have normally worked through a large part of their life and now they've retired, and so they've invested their own money into that pool of money throughout their working life, and now that money can come back to them and help support them in their retirement. Or just people who have been unable to work. And related to that, we have our employment income as well. And so that's money that goes to people who are temporarily off work. If you're a seasonal worker and suddenly there's no more crops to harvest, you might qualify for employment insurance. Or people who become injured or sick and are temporarily off work and they need a little bit of money to get by, employment insurance can also help those people out as well. So this is just ways that we act as citizens of our country and our communities. We contribute to those pots of money, and in turn, they may be paid back to us if we have need of them, or they help support other members in our community. And this is where we get the difference between our gross pay and our net pay, or our take-home pay. So let's talk about that. All right, so let's talk about the difference between gross pay and net pay. So gross pay is like the original amount of money that you earn. So you get hired at a job, they're like, we're going to pay you $14.25 per hour. Multiply that by the number of hours, that gives you the total amount of money that you've earned. But you don't get to keep all that money that you've earned. A bunch of that money goes to your deductions. That's the income tax, the Canada Pension Plan, and the EI that we mentioned. Those are our most common payroll deductions. In other situations, you may have other money taken off. So some people automatically have money deducted from their paychecks that go to charity. Some people have money automatically taken off their paychecks that go to pay their union dues. So for example, as a teacher, I actually have more deductions than many other employees just because we have money that goes to different teacher fees, money that goes to our union to pay for our union dues, and a good chunk of our money that goes to our teacher pension plan. So we give money to the Canada Pension Plan that goes to the whole pool for all of Canada, but also money to a specific teacher pension plan that goes to the public school teachers of Ontario. So it's like we contribute to the government one, but the teachers or the teachers' unions have also set up their own pool of money to support themselves independent of what the government has to offer. So we start with that gross pay, we minus the deductions, all those fees and taxes that we pay, and whatever's left is our net pay. So let's take a look at a quick example here. So here's our general formula. Our gross pay minus our deductions gives us our net pay or our take-home pay. So as a quick example, let's say the gross pay for somebody is $2,000 per paycheck, and their deductions, so they're going to pay their CPP, their EI, their income tax, whatever, and let's say that's going to be $350, 2,000 gross pay minus deductions $350 gives us our net pay $1,650. And so this is just a quick calculation and example of how to find net pay. Take your gross pay, subtract all the deductions, and what's left is your net pay or your take-home pay. The next question we might ask ourselves is how do we know how much the deductions are? How do I know how much money I should be sending to the government? How do I predict how much my take-home pay will actually be? How do I make sure that my employer is paying the right amount of money to the government and I'm not going to suddenly owe a whole bunch at tax time at the end of the year? And the way we can check that is with the Payroll Deductions online calculator. So this is provided by the Government of Canada. You can see we're on the Government of Canada website, canada.ca. I could post a link, but it's pretty complicated. Honestly, just Google CRA Payroll Deductions Calculator, and this window will come up. So let's continue from our previous example where they were earning $2,000 every 2 weeks. And let's do a quick calculation here. So I'm just going to do a crash course demonstration here on how to use the Payroll Deductions online calculator. Honestly, there's a lot of options in the calculator, but we can ignore and not change most of them. So let's take a look. You go to the website, this is where they start you off. And we're going to scroll down, and to use the calculator, to continue, select I accept, I accept. All right, we're going to leave this alone. We're just going to do salary. Don't worry about commission. Don't worry about pension. Don't worry about this one. We're going to click next. Employer's name and stuff, we can leave this all blank. If there's no star, it is optional. Don't bother filling it in. If you want to, that's fine, but you don't need to. All right, province or territory of employment. We're all in Ontario. We're going to use Ontario. For this and most examples, we're going to assume that we're paid every 2 weeks. So that's bi-weekly, 26 pay periods per year. And date the employee is paid. If I ask you to use the calculator for a question, I will give you a specific date to use. As is, I'm going to use today's date, which is 2020, October 8th. Next. All right, salary or wages income per pay period. In our previous example in Google Sheets, and I can actually jump back really quick, we assumed that we were making $2,000, and I just totally randomly guessed the $350 here. So all we know is we're going to earn $2,000 every 2 weeks. So how much money? $2,000. And some employers pay vacation pay. Don't worry about that. Leave it blank. Don't change anything here. Don't worry about bonus or retroactive pay. Don't select any of these special conditions. In the future, if you're using this for real, some of these may apply, but for our example right now, just don't worry about it. Scroll down. We're not a member of the clergy. Don't worry about it. Just click next. All right, once again, we don't need to change anything here. Leave all the default amounts. And we're going to go ahead and click calculate at the bottom. All right, and here we go. Here's our gross pay, $2,000. So our salary or wages, so our total cash income, $2,000. And then it automatically calculates our income tax here. So part of our income tax goes to the federal government, so the government in Ottawa for all of Canada. And then part of our money goes to the provincial government, so to fund things locally in Ontario. So we're going to have two subtotals, some money going to the federal, some to the provincial, and then it gives the total here. So this is the total amount that we need to pay to the governments for income tax. Our contribution to the Canada Pension Plan is right here, $97.93, and our employment insurance deductions are right here, $31.60. So out of our $2,000, we have to pay $441.99 to the government to support these programs, and this is our take-home pay right here, $1558.01. And the rest we don't really need to worry about. So they give you everything you need to know in this nice table here. We got our money in, we got our total money out, and we have our difference. So we have our gross pay here at the top, we have our total deductions here, and our final number here is our net or take-home pay. And so we can use this for a variety of questions depending on our situation. If we do have questions where you get paid monthly or weekly or whatever, that's fine. There are options, but the questions I may give you as examples are just going to be bi-weekly. And for the most part, you can ignore most of the options. If there's any steps you missed or you weren't sure where I clicked, just go back in the video and take a look. The other question I want to answer is, what does it actually mean to file your taxes? So when we talk about the word file, like what does that mean? Like we have files on our computers, or we have like maybe file folders at home, you know, it's like the folded envelope thing, and you put papers in and then you put it in a filing cabinet. But that's not really what we mean when we say file taxes. We're going to take a look briefly at this reading. This is from the grade 11 textbook that's normally used for the workplace math course. And I know this is grade 12 math, but the grade 11 textbook, it's the Irwin Workplace 11 math textbook, is the one that talks about how to file income taxes. So we're just going to take a look at an excerpt from that book really quickly. And what we're talking about here is, what do we need to do to actually file a personal income tax? We need the following items. We need T1 general forms. We need the general income tax and benefit guide, information slips, and receipts for deductions or credits to be claimed. So basically what that means is the T1 form is a form that you fill out, and that's where you declare, this is how much money I made. There's a bunch of questions about, does this circumstance apply to you? Do you have a disabled child? Are you over the age of 65? Just to give you information about any tax credits or tax deductions you might qualify for. So basically it's a guide to help you figure out how much you owe. The General Income Tax and Benefit Guide is a booklet the government provides every year, and it just explains how to fill out the T1 form. So honestly, I've never actually looked at a General Income Tax and Benefit Guide. It's not strictly necessary. It's just a brochure, a booklet that helps describe how do you fill out your T1 form for your taxes. Information slips are slips about, they're pieces of information, they're documents about your income. So your employer will give you a slip that says this is how much money you made. If you give money to charity, they will give you an information slip that says this is how much money has been given to us by this person. And then receipts for deductions or credits to be claimed. So you can claim deductions or credits for things like money that you've spent on medicine or healthcare, or things like charities will give you a charitable donation receipt. And so it is proof of certain expenses you've had during the year that will affect how much tax you owe. So what does it mean to file your taxes? In summary, you fill out the T1 general form, one for the provincial government, one for the federal government. You provide copies of your information slips, so any money you've received that has like proof of your income or proof of money you've given away, and then things that you can claim that I don't need to pay tax on these. It's proof of things like healthcare expenses and things like that. So you can get these online nowadays or at the post office. The information forms are blank. They need to be filled in by you, or perhaps you go to an accountant and they help you. And let's just see what else is in the reading. Information slips are also government forms. Unlike the T1 general form, they are already completed when taxpayers receive them. This includes T4 and T5 slips. So the T1 slip, T1 form is a blank form that you fill out with all your tax information. T4 is something that your job will give to you. A T4 is also called a statement of remuneration paid. And remuneration is just like pay. It's just money. So it's an official record of how much income you earned during the year and how much money your employer collected on your behalf and sent to the government for the pension plan, employment insurance, and income tax, and anything else that came off your taxes that might affect your income tax. You'll get one of these from each job that you have. So if you work for more than one employer, they will issue a T4 slip, and they are required legally to do that. If your work will not give you a T4 slip, or along with that, there's also a piece of paper called a record of employment that your employer must give you when you are fired or no longer work there. They can get in big trouble for not doing that. Another common information slip is a T5 slip. This is also called a statement of investment income. So if you have money that is invested and you are earning interest off that, that interest earned also counts as income, so you need to report that to the government as part of what you owe income tax on. Finally, those receipts that can be used for tax deductions or credits, and I'll talk later about the difference between a tax deduction and a tax credit. That includes proof of like how much money you've given to charity, medical expenses, union dues, childcare expenses, moving expenses, and contributions you've made to a registered retirement savings plan or RRSP. So, quick overview. What does it mean to file your taxes? Fill out the T1 form. Provide copies of the information slips, so proof of how much money you've earned from your employers, your job, or from investments, and receipts for proof of money that you've spent on things like charitable donations, medical expenses, etc. So back in the day, you'd get this all on paper, You'd fill it out, you'd put it in an envelope and send it to the CRA office for them to process. Nowadays, we mostly do this stuff online, and so filing your taxes basically means completing these forms online and digitally submitting them to the government. Or some people choose to have their accountant do it. So personally, I don't fill out these forms myself. I go through all my list of papers that are required. I find my receipts. I find my T4 slips. I whatever other documentation I need. I have a whole package. My wife and I, we drive it to our accountant's office and we say, here's all the information that you need. Sometimes we'll sit and chat with him for a little bit if he has any questions or advice for us, and then he does it all on the computer and sends it off to the CRA. So that is what we mean when we say filing taxes. The next topic I'd like to talk about is what is meant by the terms tax credit and tax deduction, and what is the difference. So let's take a look at the definition of tax credit, and then I'll try to illustrate that with an example here in Google Sheets. So a tax credit is an amount of money that taxpayers are permitted to subtract from taxes owed to their government. The value of a tax credit depends on the nature of the credit. Certain types of tax credits are granted to individuals or businesses in specific locations, classifications, or industries. So sometimes, in order to convince a business to come to their town, a community might say, we will give you a tax credit. So you bring industry here, you do business here, you employ the people that live in this community, and in exchange, we'll take $100,000 off of what you owe in taxes. Unlike deductions and exemptions, which reduce the amount of taxable income, and we'll talk about that in a moment, tax credits reduce the actual amount of tax owed. So let's take a look at our example here, and I'm just making up these numbers so they don't really matter specifically. What matters is what we're going to do with them. So in our original case here, when we're talking about a tax credit, let's say that we had an income of $50,000 and the amount of tax we owed to the government was $3,000. If I have a tax credit, that gets subtracted directly from what we owe the government. So I fill out my T1 form, I put in my original income as $50,000, I do all the math, I claim whatever, and at the end it says you owe $3,000. But if we do something that qualifies us for a tax credit, that's subtracted directly from the amount we owe to the government. So the amount we owe to the government is originally $3,000. For whatever reason, let's say we received a $1,000 tax credit, that comes directly off the amount owed to the government. So ultimately, I only owe $2,000. So credit is it's like money back. It's like a coupon that says you save this much money directly. So it does not affect our taxable income. We figure out how much money we owe the government. So this is what I owe. I take the tax credit, I subtract that amount, and the amount you actually have to pay is the $2,000. And often we'll talk about credits and deductions kind of at the same time, but a deduction is different. So let's see how it's different by looking at through another example. The next question we want to answer is, what is a tax deduction? Credits and deductions are often talked about at the same time, but they mean different things. Our tax credit was a direct reduction in what we owed the government. So we did our calculation based on our real income, and then at the end it says, okay, you owe the government this much money. Oh, you have a credit, let's subtract that, and then you just pay the difference. With a tax deduction, it's going to affect your income, so let's take a look. A tax deduction is a reduction in tax obligation from a taxpayer's gross income. Tax deductions can be the result of a variety of events that the taxpayer experiences over the course of the year. Tax deductions are removed from taxable income, also known as the adjusted gross income, and thus lowers the taxpayer's overall tax liability. So let's take a look at our example from last time. Our real income is $50,000. As we fill out our T1 form, we discover we're eligible for certain tax deductions. So let's say we qualify for a $5,000 tax deduction. What that does is that is subtracted from our income. So the amount that the government sees and actually we have to pay tax on is reduced to only $45,000. And we'll notice here that when I change that, I'm going to undo and redo that. So the amount I owe to the government is always some percent of my income, but because I'm allowed to deduct $5,000 from my income, the amount the government is taxing me on is now less, so my income has been adjusted, so the amount I owe the government is now less. So whereas I originally owed them $3,000, my tax deduction indirectly changed the amount that I owe the government. And if I'm lucky and I have tax credits as well, let's say I have a tax credit of $500, then that directly changes the amount that I pay. So to summarize, tax deductions change what my income looks like. So it changes how much the government sees and actually taxes us on. So it's a change in our taxable income, whereas a tax credit is a subtraction directly from how much we owe the government. So the tax deduction changes our calculation. It changes how much we're going to owe originally, but then the tax credit comes directly off the bill. So technically a tax credit is better. So if I have a $5,000 tax credit and a $5,000 deduction, $5,000 tax credit is better because that's like money in your hand. Basically, if you have a tax credit for $5,000 and you currently owe the government $0, they're going to owe you $5,000. And that's why we get money back from the government sometimes. We've overpaid or we qualify for tax credits they didn't realize originally. Okay, you get more of the money back that you originally paid us during the year. The final topic we're going to discuss in this video is how to get help with your income taxes, especially because I don't have a lot of time here to show you the actual forms, to go through how to fill them out. You're going to have an incomplete knowledge of how to file your taxes. And like I said, even as a math teacher, I find the process a little complicated. I pay my accountant to take care of that for me. But where can you get help? What if we can't afford an accountant? What if we want to do it ourselves, but we just need a little bit of help? We're going to take a look at this excerpt. This is once again a reading I'm going to show you from the grade 11 Irwin textbook, and let's just see what it has to say about where to get help with your income tax. The government departments that deal with the income tax is the CRA, Canada Customs and Revenue Agency. They've actually changed the name. This is an older textbook. It's just the Canada Revenue Agency. Inside that general income tax and benefit guide, so that's the guide you can find online or at your post office or whatever that explains how to file your tax, you will find additional ways to get information on how to file a tax return. So we can use the internet. We can go to the CRA website. They have a lot of great resources and explanations there, and I'll show you that after we talk about this reading. There are phone numbers you can call to get help, or in person by visiting a tax services office. So you can go somewhere and get help. The guide also indicates that the government trains volunteers to complete basic tax returns for low-income individuals. So if you don't make enough money, you may qualify to get free help from volunteers. A phone number is provided to get more information about this free service. There are other sources of help for filing tax returns. Libraries or community centers often offer classes in January because our taxes are usually due in I think March or April. So ahead of time, they help you learn how to do it. Or February to help people complete their income tax forms. There are businesses whose sole purpose is to complete tax returns. So businesses like H&R Block, I think they have other services too, but that's somewhere you can go and pay them to help you submit your taxes. An accounting firm can be hired to complete income taxes. So that's what I do. I hire an accountant. He has his own business. He doesn't work for a firm, but he's the person who does that for me. Or we can also use software. Once again, if we had more time, if we were in class, this is something I would love to explore. But as is, all I can tell you is that there is software that can fill out the stuff for you. They kind of ask you questions, you answer them truthfully, and then it helps automatically fill in the form for you. I know like TurboTax or Intuit, I believe, are companies that make that kind of software. And then I will have you do an investigation later and see where in your community can you actually go and get help. So if you find filing your taxes scary and you aren't sure what to do, check the CRA website. You can give them a call if you want. You can visit a government. I think you can go to like Service Canada maybe and ask for help. I'm not entirely sure about that one. Otherwise, there are great community resources with libraries or community centers that have classes. There are places you can go and volunteers will help you if you have a low income. There are businesses you can hire like H&R Block, or you can go to an accounting firm or get software that'll help you fill everything in as well. And let's take a look at one of those government resources and see what it actually looks like. So this is from the CRA website. Once again, the website itself is kind of long. just Google CRA, how to do your taxes, and you should be able to find this page. So let's see what kind of information they provide for people who need it, and how the government describes how to do your taxes. So this website, lots of great links here. In fact, this is not the website I'm supposed to be on, so I'm going to go back. There we go. They have a specific section on doing your taxes. And this is the information that's going to be provided here. The deadline, gathering your tax information, ways to file your return, completing your tax return, sending your tax return, what to do after you send your tax return, when to expect a refund, how to pay if you actually owe money, and if you need to change your return. So let's take a look quickly. First, the important dates. The due date for filing individual tax returns was extended to June 1st. Like I said, usually it's due in like March or April, but because of COVID and everything, it's been extended this year. Taxpayers will have until September 30th, 2020, so that's recently passed, to pay any 2019 income tax amounts owed. There's some special information for people who are self-employed as well. They have some slightly different deadlines, and they fill out their taxes slightly differently. Normally, that's something we talk about in this course, but for the sake of time, we have to move on. Same with the special case of if you're dealing with a deceased person, if your parent or grandparent has passed, someone will still need to deal with the taxation for their estate. First step to file your taxes is to gather your tax information. So you need to find the info slips, and these are some of the documents we talked about earlier. Your T4, which is proof of how much money you made from work, or your T5, your proof of how much money you made from investments. Ways to file your tax return. So how do I actually fill in that paperwork and get it to the government? There's a list of software that we can use to help fill it in. We can fill it out on paper and submit it that way. There's information here about getting the forms or a phone number to call. You can do it by phone for certain people, or there's that community volunteer program that we talked about. If you need help, if you have a modest or low income and you have a simple tax situation, you can go speak to these volunteers for free in March or April across Canada. Some are open year-round, and there's more specific information here if you are interested in that option. How do we complete your return? As you fill out the form, you provide and update your personal information. So that's things like your marital status, number of children, banking information, home address. Report your income. So we look at those T4 slips and fill in how much money we earned during the year. Claim your deductions, tax credits, and expenses. So is there any deductions? So that will affect the amount of income the government sees and taxes you on. We have the credits, and that's where we get to take money directly off the amount that we owed, and any expenses related to things like moving, childcare, healthcare, and that may impact how much you owe. How do we send our information to the CRA? How do we literally do the filing part of filing our taxes? You can do it electronically. The information goes straight to the CRA, by paper, or by phone. Note, remember to keep all your receipts. You must keep all your tax documents for at least 6 years. So that means anytime in the next 6 years, the CRA can go back and double check your file, and they might say, hey, some of these numbers are wrong, or hey, we didn't actually see proof of this amount. And they might call you up and ask you to provide that proof. After you send your tax return, you will get a notice of assessment. Basically, it's like a receipt saying, yes, we have received your information. After that, you could receive your refund as soon as within 8 business days. If you send a paper tax return, it takes time to go through the mail. Someone has to open it and process it. So it can take as many as 8 weeks before the CRA gives you that notice of assessment and the refund. If you owe money, there are many ways to make payments to the CRA. We can take a look at that in a moment, actually. And if you cannot pay the full amount that you owe, you can make a payment arrangement. You could also make a change to your return if you need to. I had a couple years ago that my accountant made a typo when he was typing it in, and he accidentally said that we paid like $800,000 in rent for the year. So then that like changed how much we owed. It like qualified us for a program because the government was like, whoa, you're paying way more for rent than you can afford. You need some money to help you get by. So we realized that mistake within a couple months. We sent in a form just saying to the government, hey, that was a mistake. Here's our real income. We had to pay them a little bit of money back. Like, we knew right away we didn't qualify for that money, so we kept it in a separate account. and then sent it back to the government later. So it was no big deal. These kind of things happen. It's when you try to be sneaky or lie to the government that you can get in big trouble. And let's take a look briefly at how do we make a payment to the CRA. Like they said, or like we've talked about before, we can pay online. There's a few options. We can pay with credit card, PayPal, or e-transfer. We can pay using a third-party service provider. We can pay in person at banks or Canada Post. If you don't have a bank account, there are options, or you can even pay by check. All right, so that is our summary of taxes in Canada. I know that's a lot of information, but those are the highlights. Those are the main things I want us to try to remember from this unit. So think, what is tax money used for? Who is in control of taxes in Canada? The CRA. What are the common deductions from our paychecks? So we take money off what we earn and send it to the government for employment insurance, Canada Pension Plan, and income tax. Those deductions are what determines the difference between our gross pay, the total amount that we earn. Deductions come off and go to the government to support our communities and our country or our province, and the amount that's left we take home. That's our take-home pay. In order to do those calculations and know how much we owe, we can use the CRA payroll deduction calculator. That's free, available online to all Canadians, and you can use that anytime you want to double check your actual real paychecks or to predict how much you will owe in the future. Filing your taxes means filling in that T1 form and sending in that along with any documentation to the government. You can get help if you don't know how to do that through community programs or calling the CRA. You might want to hire an accountant or go to a business like H&R Block. They can help you. And we also talked about the difference between tax credits and tax deductions, where a deduction changes the amount of your income that the government sees and taxes you on, or credit is where you directly take money off what you owe. I know that's a lot of information, but that's everything. So that is basically a quick overview of how taxes work in Canada. I hope you found that helpful.